Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Deeper and Wednesday evening with Sandra Harrick and myself. Reverend Sandra Harrick, how are you over there in Westmoreland, New Hampshire?
Well, I will describe one of your favorite views, sitting on the deck, looking at those trees. The pool is open, the horses are out there, and our dog is minding the flock.
Aww.
Bells are chiming. The sun is literally on the far hills. I look to the east, and the sun is just casting this beautiful light from the west onto these beautiful rolling hills that we have. So I'm fine. The bugs may piss me off a little bit, but hey, I'll spray.
'Tis the season, huh, Sam?
It really is. How are you over there?
Good. We had a nice cool day yesterday and today. We only got up to like 70 yesterday and mid-70s today, so it's been a wonderful break in the 90-degree humid, Lake Michigan weather. So it's been a very pleasant day.
It was hot. It's finally cooling off here too.
Yeah.
Michigan is beautiful in the summer.
It is gorgeous here. It certainly is. And
have you been to the lakes?
No, I've not done that yet.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I just got the goosebumps.
Out there at Lake Michigan at Grand Haven. Yeah. It's really spectacular when the lighthouse lights go on in the evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a breathtaking view. Lily is in the chat and she's saying, Sandy sounds far away, farther than New Hampshire.
Okay, I'll take that off. How's that, Lily? Is that better? I had the speaker on. Can you hear me now, Lily? I've been known to be farther away than New Hampshire, even this year.
And isn't that something? I think, Todd and I were speaking earlier about travel. And, for those of us like you and I that are kind of gypsies in our soul and we just like to be moving and grooving about planet Earth, this is a really different time.
It really is. I've seen on Facebook where, last week or the past few days, I was out there with everybody and we had our first ice cream and Easton had his first ice cream in utero. And I miss going down to, all the little villages that I used to, or over to Europe. I mean, really, California, it's like, wow, my airplane tickets, I'm saving money.
Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. Yeah.
I know. It's kind of like, I didn't mind sitting still, but now I'm starting to feel like I need a view.
Yeah.
Other than my own.
Yeah.
So Bobby and I are taking mini trips with the top down.
Very nice.
Yeah. And that helps. Even if it's the Keenan back, it's a mini trip.
Exactly.
Where would you want to go if you were able to get out of Dodge?
Well, where would I go? I think I would like to go to wine country over in Napa.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And have you been there?
I haven't. And, originally Todd and I were slated to go to Savannah in March. And, the kibosh was put to that whole thing. And we considered talking then about going out to Napa Valley to wine country, and that's just not happening.
No. And it is a beautiful place. I mean, California, wine country. Oh, my God, the way the two of you like wine.
Yeah. Exactly.
I can see you rolling through it now. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and of course you'd have to do San Francisco and the whole shebang if you're that close to everything.
Yeah.
It's good. Okay, so we had a request to have a conversation today.
We did. Cynthia, it's good to have you in the chat room. Lady Hawk, it's great to have you in the chat room as well.
Hi, Lady Hawk. Dana and I definitely had that young man in our prayers, and thank you for asking us to do so.
Yeah. A lot of people in need of a lot of prayers right about now.
Yeah, we're in trouble.
We are. In some respects, we are.
In trouble.
Yeah.
No matter how good it is to get changed, it brings trouble.
It does. And that's really, I believe, the impetus for the show. You and I were asked specifically to talk about the subject for tonight, and that is death without dying. That's a
crawl through, but then just let it go.
Yeah. That's a deep subject matter.
So, what was the request specifically?
Would you talk about, the way that we are experiencing the many deaths without dying as a result of the pandemic? Because for a lot of us, life is not ever going to be the same for a lot of reasons. And how do we pick up and continue living? And there are people right now that are in full-blown depression, addiction, that are experiencing the death without dying.
Right. So let's dedicate this then to what the subject is really in the holy sacred spot of it, in the fact that we are in an upheaval, we are in a reckoning, we are in an evolution that is brought to our attention by a revolution, and there is this energy around all of us that has contained us in a way that we have all been sent to literally a recovery facility, even if it was in our own homes. And what I mean by that is if you go to a treatment facility for any kind of addiction or difficulty or post-traumatic stress or anything where you are put into a place to be contained so that you can go through the withdrawal of something, even if it's the quote-unquote repetition of your life patterning, that is what alters the brain. It takes about 90 days for the brain to alter from a scenario that it is used to or addicted to. And so this is Mother's Nature's and Spirit, as far as I'm concerned, way of sending us to our rooms, sending us to get out of the routine of our own obsessive behavior, find out who we are, find out who we aren't, and to find out what it is that needs to die, what needs to end. So many of my sessions right now are, when somebody says, well, I'm done, and I said, let's reframe that to I'm complete.
I like that.
That gives me the shivers.
Yes.
And why do you like that? How does the phrase alter the quote-unquote an attitude that, well, I'm done with that, to, well, you're complete?
When I hear the word complete, what it says to me is that there's a segment that's completed and it's time to begin again. And when I hear the word done, it's like the Sarge used to say, I am done, D-U-N. And that meant it was finito.
Yeah. I've said it a few times, even though I was completing my sentences with it.
Exactly. So for me, the word complete is hopeful.
Yes. And it also means that we are in a karmic cesspool. I was going to say something nice, but we really are. We are in the cesspool of our karma with the Piscean age coming to the end, where all the shadow and gook and grime that has been hidden or in the closet or deemed as don't see, do as I say, not as I do, that has been squelched. Femininity is standing up in a different way. And so it is stirring up the gunk that, in all due respect, as a female, we are championing the next, the new, and yet there's grief for we no longer can rely on our feminine, quote-unquote, reliance on something because, well, I'm a girl or I'm a woman and I'm supposed to be taken care of, or you're supposed to, all that other. Those days are coming to an end. They're being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that? What's going on in that feminine area of your arena?
Well, for me, when I think about what you just said, it's not so much about the death of June Cleaver as it is about the birth of Wonder Woman. And that it's okay to unleash, if you will, or to allow the expression of all of the gifts and talents, of the wisdom, the intellect, the intuition, etc., that it can be allowed now without feeling penalized for, because powerful women would, and there are many perceptions of that word powerful. Powerful women have, for the most part, for a very long time, had to maintain some of that June Cleaver, Doris Day persona in order to have relationship.
Right. To survive.
Yeah.
To be, to have clothes and food and keep the children.
Yeah.
To have shelter. I mean, that's not even a gee whiz. It's so ancient. It's so primal. It's so what the woman has been, or the feminine has been obligated to do, sent to school for, or you do what you do so that the children survive. You do what you do so that the children eat. You do what you do so that you can be, quote unquote, the woman that has managed to keep the family safe. And that has nothing against the men. That's what the men did. They found someone to give them the family. They went off. And there's this whole new energy where even within that structure, women have jobs within the family. My dog is deciding to look for the bone that she buried.
Aww.
Yeah. Women have jobs. Men have jobs. Children have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Just to keep the reality of the family structure going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a patriarchal system only anymore.
Exactly.
And for me, there's the beauty of, in the death of the dying of that, or the completion of that, it means that men are graciously or uncomfortably stretching to give the feminine inside themselves even space to relate to the feminine within their wives, their partners, or other females.
Mm-hmm.
And so even the masculine patriarchal there's a grief in men for how do we hang on to that, or are we supposed to hang on to that, or should we hang on to that, or is that the only way it's supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
And there's something new, and it's not an idea alone. You know for a fact, I know for a fact, and anybody that's listening to us know that astronomy, astrology, the prophets have talked about this time. The stories in all sorts of books of great sacredness talk about this time.
Yes.
So this is a reckoning where I know in my own grief, I'm grieving something that allows me not to be a prisoner to my own idea of what I was supposed to be, to the freedom to be what I am. Truly what I am, not even what I want to be, what I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's new.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to deal with that, because that kind of permission, that means I have to be responsible in a different way. I can lean on my partner, but I can't, or stand next to them, but I can't forfeit myself to my partner.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How does that word feel to you?
The
Where
word.
have you forfeited and have stopped forfeiting?
I think I stopped forfeiting a long time ago. And I remember being very consciously aware of the day that I stopped forfeiting. Like blatantly, there it is. And I remember sitting at the newspaper, there on Executive Row in my executive office that was big as a battleship. And I remembered thinking to myself, Dana Lynn, you will never forfeit your own peace of mind. You will never forfeit being who you are ever again. And in that who you are, I'm talking about myself and my mystical self or my spiritual self.
Right.
And
you just gave me the goosebumps. really beautiful.
Yeah. And I remember it vividly. And here I am sitting in this magnificent office with artwork and statuary and looking around and feeling very blessed for the opportunity for, having worked there for 3 decades. But knowing full well that there was a death that was occurring. And it was the death to my corporate self.
Right.
And in a flash, you will never have to forfeit again.
What compressed inside you to have that experience?
Well, it was that time in the economy where, newspapers were consolidating, and I was watching fellow employees that had worked with me 30 years. Some had been there more than 40 years, some close to 50 years. And I was watching them receive their walking papers without so much as a handshake and a thank you. And I was watching them die from heart attacks and stroke and cancers because the life that they had known and the life that they had been promised under the corporate guise of, we're corporately and your family, but we are your family and you'll be taken care of. The rug had been pulled out from them.
Right.
And I remember thinking to myself in that moment, what have they forfeited? So that at the end of their 3 and 4 decades of service to a family, what if they forfeited to be ushered out of the door without so much as a thank you or a handshake, let alone a hug?
Wow.
And in that moment, I knew I'm done here.
Right.
Yeah. And I did a lot of hospice work with fellow employees, literally going to the hospital to visit them, counseling them in my office about, what happens next? Who am I now that I'm not working at this newspaper? And I believe that a lot of people right now, Sandy, are having that same question within themselves, or they're being approached with others at an even higher level of, this is life altering because we are no longer allowed to be naive.
No.
About our history, about our prejudices, any of it. Naivete is no longer allowable.
Well, this is a profound observation that you're making because we are grieving being naive.
Yes.
Or, looking the other way, and if you don't see it, you don't know it, and if you don't know it, you don't have to be aware of it, and if you're not aware of it, you don't have to do anything about it, as it's happening right before your very eyes.
Mm-hmm.
We are exposed now in a way that we can actually grieve our ability to stay as involved as much as we would like, rather than be bombarded with everything we don't even have to sort out.
Right.
That's a death to our consciousness in a way that we have to be really different, and you just don't let everything in because it is overwhelming.
Yes.
I think we're grieving our quiet.
Well, yeah, there is some of that as well. And I believe that we're grieving this idea of what we think, without getting political, because that's not what our show is about. But I think we're grieving, some people are grieving what America is supposed to be, what the United States of America is supposed to represent. And so there's grief on a larger scale. There's grief for people who are finding out the reality of history of this country.
Right.
And the grief that, you mean what I was taught in the history books while I was in high school in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that's not really what happened?
No.
So there's
selective.
Absolutely very selective, and people are discovering things that bring them to the edge of death about perhaps what they thought about an historic figure or a place in time. Or, for me, I love history. And as you know, I'm a history nerd.
Right.
So it's not shocking to me to find out that, New York had slaves for, longer than Georgia or before Georgia, and that George Washington had slaves. He loved them. He kept them, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That's not new news to me.
Right.
That's really new news to a lot of people.
Right.
And so there's death of an idea, or the death of an understanding, or the death of stubborn ignorance, as Todd calls it.
Well, maybe it's ignorance from any place where we have not been offered the education or dug deeper to find out more than what we were told.
Right. And then there's the stubborn ignorance that knows that there's a difference, but refuses to budge from the place of ignorance.
Right.
Because that means then that there is a death.
Exactly. And once you know, you can't go back and not know.
Bingo. Yeah. Hey, Jessica Clark.
And you can grieve not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So there's that place of, for me, it means psychologically and emotionally growing up.
Mm-hmm.
To have to involve ourselves with a broader stroke of life.
Right.
Because anything you're talking about or I'm talking about that people now, including ourselves, are finding out or exposing has been going on anyhow.
Yes.
It may be new information, but it's not really new news.
Exactly. There's kind of a death of Mayberry.
Exactly.
That's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's the death to being an idealist.
Yeah.
There's a death to being an idea of when will there be? When will there be? Well, you know what? There's always peace and there's always resistance. There's always something. There's a roller coaster of life.
Yeah.
That every single second something is being given life and some form of life is dying.
Yes.
Whether we are aware of it or not.
Yes.
And isn't it amazing how I know for myself, I can look at a situation and oh boy, I'm glad it's not me. That I'm watching, that I feel, like I don't have to deal with that. And then there's times it's like, why me?
Yeah.
Why me?
Right. Hey, Linda Griezak.
Say it again.
Linda Griezak just joined in the fun. So did Jessica Clark.
Oh, hi ladies. Hi, everybody. And I think it's important to know what do we want to have alive?
Yeah.
What do we want to keep alive?
Right. What do we want to give birth to?
What do we want to give birth to? And what do we want to put, if it's born,
yeah.
And there it is, do you want to breathe life into it?
Right.
Because that's an option also.
Mm-hmm.
That all of a sudden, there it is, right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's present. This upheaval, this transition is right here. I'm very clear I'm available for this because I'm alive during it. But I'm also selective of how I participate. That's choice. That's option. This isn't my first rally. I just had a belch. This is my first belch of the evening.
There it is.
And each generation, I grieve my youth as something that I could just get up and want to walk and I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, today I get up and it's like I got to think about it. Where am I going?
Prepare yourself.
Is my body going to turn? Because I've actually been painting the house, and so it's like my body's going, oh, you're in trouble. But there's that grief of it's not like it was, but what is it?
Right.
What is it? And so completing something, no matter what it is embracing the existence that it truly, truly, truly has had its time.
Mm-hmm.
And to honor the time, enjoy the time, reminisce the time, maybe grieve a ton, but know that, and this is one of the things that spirituality or anything else, what is next is as viable and as important as the time that you're tucking in and saying, I've completed.
Right.
So I can bring my attention to it. I can bring my life to it and not just live in the past, grieving. To give grief the due that I am, anybody that is grieving, including my own self, please, this is not to say don't do it. This means give it its due. Feel the passion of what it is that you are grieving. Don't avoid it. I think avoiding grief is as paralyzing of staying in grief so long that you don't even know you're alive.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
How do you feel about that? What do you want to say about that? When people just, oh no, I don't want to feel it. I don't want to feel it.
Right. Well, for some people, emotions are scary. For some people, they know they're supposed to feel something, but they're not capable of feeling for one reason or another. But with regard to taking time to grieve, it's essential. It's absolutely essential. Staying in grief serves no one, including the person that's perpetually grieving. But you have to give grief to, I mean, it can be something as simple as for people who love to go to rock concerts, and maybe they planned their whole summer, going to see Aerosmith and Fleetwood Mac and Bobby Love, or, wherever they were going. And maybe now they can't do that. And there's some grief about what they perceive should be or was supposed to be. And how do you replace what you thought was supposed to be with, well, this is what it is, and perhaps this is what was supposed to be. And out of that death to what we thought we had planned and what we thought should be, what do we give birth to in this blank palette, this blank canvas? I mean, we have a choice, as you said.
Right. This whole, where we are right now is a major inconvenience.
It is.
Let's just face it.
Yeah.
I mean, if I want to be, a little sassy, this is a major inconvenience.
Yes.
And because it interrupts everybody's life. And I think this is what's so incredibly different, is this is the first time I've ever been equally on the same terms as everybody else in some way. This was not selective. This was global.
Mm-hmm.
So we're into something where we all had to stay home. We've all been challenged with what is work, where's the money, or how does it get here, who do we go to? Or, I mean, there's something here that people who thought this would never touch me, is all of a sudden something radical is new. So I want to honor this. And we're in that stretch now of how do we come out of it? Do we come out of it? Who are we out of it? And I think the question that is really profoundly asked is, am I safe to go into what is next? Do I have an identity? Do I have the courage to face my new identity? And ready or not, it's time to look at these issues. And again, this is what this time is about. Each generation has something they have to really face. Mm-hmm. Each century has something that is a major inconvenience, whether it's a war or polio or a pandemic. This isn't the first time it's happened to a society.
No.
Or a major earthquake or a tsunami or something that has wiped out everything. The fires in California, the floods down south. I mean, in Michigan, the people that lost their homes,
mm-hmm.
the hurricanes that are happening. This is. I'm cozy where I'm sitting right now. Amen. Knock on wood. Here's my house. Here's my land. Here I am. I can talk about this, but I have lost. I have had everything taken right out from underneath me. So I understand that breathlessness of what the hell just happened. And will I die or will I live? And what happened is a death came to the way I am familiar. And incredibly enough, I didn't die. And that was a confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we don't die, it would have been convenient to die.
Mm-hmm.
That would have solved a whole lot of problems. And that's part of the depression. Would it be easier to die? Do I have the strength to rally? Do I have even an idea in my mind I can find or fathom? And life is astounding because no matter what, our thought finds a way to re-identify.
Yes.
Given time, our brain surfaces because the light changes,
Mm-hmm.
the air changes, something comes along.
Mm-hmm.
We can call it hope, but it's also the mystical aspect of movement, constantly brings to us the next, are we available to look at it?
Exactly. And I think that this is where it's really important that we take time to listen to the voice of our soul.
Mm-hmm.
And to make room for that, because we can very easily get caught up when we talk about death without dying. Oftentimes we think about the physical body going through an illness or dis-ease, or there are various things, but the soul is eternal. And our soul is infinitely wise. And in those times where, we have had those moments, we've all had them. Tara Rietberg is in the chat room. And Tara, you remember when I had that stroke in 2005. And I couldn't walk on my own. And I could barely put a sentence together. I couldn't even write my name, let alone cook. And my dear friend Tara would literally make meals for me and the kids and bring them over. And she would either have them already pre-cooked or she would bring them over and put them in the oven and explain to the kids, this is when it needs to come out. And she's saying, I remember. And
how can you forget that stuff?
Right. And so sometimes we do have those deaths without dying that we literally do make a choice. And in that moment in my life, I made a conscious choice that I was going to stay. And when we come to those places, honoring our spirit, honoring the path of our soul, we can forget it because we have the mundane human stuff that we need to deal with. And the human brain sometimes just wants to supersede the wisdom of the soul's mind. And the mind of the soul and the human brain are two separate entities.
Very much so. We can be bone weary.
Yes.
We can be down and out. I mean, there's that place inside me that I know that my brain said, lay down.
Mm-hmm.
And my soul said, get up.
Yes.
And it was like, could somebody vote?
No.
And it was that truth of I had to lay down so that I could get back up.
Yeah.
And that's the reprieve, that's the repose, that's the stop,
Mm-hmm.
pause,
Mm-hmm.
take the respite, take the time to readjust, recalibrate, recover, so that you don't mash yourself to the nothingness of, I can't figure it out right now, so nothing is going to happen.
That's a great point, Sandy. Sometimes you have to be in the pause, as you put it. Sometimes you just have to be in the pause and you have to be quiet. And that's all you have to be for a while. When you don't know the answer isn't right there in front of us. Sometimes we just have to push pause and be. And for me, when I do that, you wait and you pray a lot. I light a lot of candles during those periods of time. Yeah.
I can come out and stand here and start yelling and screaming, or light candle, or, my favorite sweetgrass, wherever. But there's that place of teaching your body to stop. Doesn't mean you've given up. laying down and giving in to your exhaustion or your weariness, or even thinking, if I don't figure it out right now, I'm not doing my job. I'm going to get caught. Somebody's going to think I'm not busy, or I'm not doing my best. That's the ego that has an idea of what you're supposed to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And when our ego dies or tries to kill us, and let's talk about that tune.
Mm-hmm.
When our ego tries to kill us, our spirit goes through the conscious effort to stay alive.
Yes.
And therefore, our soul has to get in the way here and intervene and literally get into that place when the ego is being challenged by a death of its own idea or its own structure of, this is my job, this is my identity,
yep,
this is my place, if I'm not here, I'm nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
That is our ego. That's our self-investment into the assumption it's the only thing we can be. And at that point, grieving our ego's ferociousness of, I survived, I made it this far, I can't go on, that's when we need to thank it, let it lay down, and incorporate it into us rather than cut it off and say you can't exist. We have to have gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
Because it lived a life that figured something out to get us this far.
Exactly.
For you to be in the corporate world, you did what you did to get you that far, to even have the stability to make the step into your spirituality.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and it was a dream that I had, to write and to be around writers my entire life. And then, there was that death without dying because I was slated to go to the United States Air Force Academy. And when I found out that I was not tall enough to fly, and not, I was going to pilot. I wanted to pilot F-14s. That was what I was going to do. And so the ego that said, what do you mean you're not tall enough? They're telling you you're not tall enough. Well, who are you now that you're not going to the Air Force Academy? And you have to retool. And what's the purpose for that? What am I supposed to do? Continue on at the newspaper. And, as I'm listening to you talk about it, it reminds me of all of the people that do invest their whole life in one thing. And then when they retire, they die.
They're dead.
They die.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, again, the addiction to adrenaline, to routine, to identity, to who am I in my freedom? Not everybody knows how to live in their freedom.
Right.
They know how to live in the ritual of productivity.
Yes.
Of the ritual being seen for who you are. Rather, what happens if you get caught being quiet, and will anybody judge you?
Right.
If you're idle?
Well, and this brings us to the death of the industrial age.
Yes.
Because that's really where we are in a lot of respects. Is the death to the industrial age and the birth of the technological, and I believe the return of the ancient wisdoms. I call it the return of the mystic, that age.
Yes.
And in the industrial world, you did clock in at 8 o'clock and you left at whenever. It was, everything was a cog. It was a wheel. And when we now find ourselves in more of a technological age, there's more freedom. And yet, if you have ancestral patterning, or you were raised by parents who said, if, idle hands are the devil's, playground.
Yeah. What are those things?
Exactly. So there's a death to a whole paradigm, I believe, going on around the world for those that come from a long line of GM workers or coal miners or what have you, here in Michigan, making Electrolux vacuum cleaners, for instance, or refrigerators. Those have really gone by the wayside for so many. And then there's a generational repatterning, a generational death without dying.
Right.
So,
one of the great moments of my life, and this is, the way I've experienced growing up is discovering that I was growing up. I didn't know how to grow up. I discovered I was relief because my left brain didn't plan for me. My right brain just kind of kept telling me, damn girl, you're going to be lucky.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't going to look pretty, but you're going to be lucky. It's like it's true. But I was on the train as a 17-year-old, graduated high school, first year of going to School of Visual Arts, and watching the momentum of what happens by becoming a commuter. And what I mean by that is you get up at a certain time, you get to the train, you stand in line, you find your seat, you figure out how to stay awake or read a book or fight off the Casanovas that are molesting you on the sly, which happened. It was like I got good stories. And, but I watched that they were men in their 60s with their hats, their coats, their this, their that, talking about what time they're going to get into the station, and that was the big game. You know, what time will the train arrive? And then they're talking about, well, who's retiring? Do they get the watch? And I'm a 17-year-old thinking, that's it? They've been on this train for 40 years, going to this job for 40 years, and the honor of that, the dignity of that,
Mm-hmm.
the achievement of that is a time. It's an epoch. It's an episode in human behavior that really doesn't quite exist anymore.
Exactly.
You got a job, you stayed in it, and you stayed in one place, and you got to the tippy top or best you could, and you got your security. You got your retirement. Those days are crumbling.
Yes.
Because we're being kicked out before your retirement's even given to you. I mean, all that idealism of how you provide a life and what you do to have it, we're grieving that.
Absolutely,
in
we
many,
are.
many ways.
Yes.
Because it's no longer available, even in the past 4 months.
Yes.
I mean, that's shocking to say, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And we're grieving the routine of a familiar that offered the sense of safety.
Yes.
Of if I do that, I get that. I'm told I've been good, and what do you mean they're going to dismiss me before I receive it?
Yes.
I was good. I paid my dues.
Yes.
And I think we're grieving ethics.
Yes.
And because things are unethical right now.
At least openly unethical. We're seeing it.
The ethics are being rediscovered. I mean, there's a lot of fighting for what is ethical or whose ethics get to exist or whose don't or what is. So let's be honest and say ethics are up for grabs.
Yes.
On who, what way, how, and there's a grief for that because there's like, what do you mean we're not just all good people?
Mm-hmm.
We just don't all intend. What are we?
Mm-hmm.
What are our ethics? What are our morals? And I think it's profound. Again, as someone in her 70s, this has happened so many times in my lifetime where the grief of even the hope gets taken away. Of, oh my God, now we're going to be safe. Oh my God, now we're going to change. With Kennedy being shot, with his brother being shot, with the idea of who would shoot, who would kill, who would do that?
Right.
To the people that are going to be that are the people. I mean, it there's the death of the idea that there's integrity that would keep me safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a question. You have integrity. You're going to keep me safe, right?
Exactly.
Those days are now being challenged.
Mm-hmm.
But excuse me, so was the covered wagon.
The Conestoga had its day. It's gone now. Lady Hawk is saying, but the hope is within. Isn't it up to us and not to another? And the answer to that is yes. But, there was a paradigm, particularly with the industrial age, that said not only do you get to retire there, but nepotism being what it meant was that generations could work at that factory. Generations could continue in that trade. And that has changed. And for some it can be a death without dying when you have the first kid in the family that doesn't want to continue with the family trade. They want to go to college or they want to do something different. There's a death without dying that we've not really experienced before in this country. And I'm seeing it, in my practice. Particularly with young people that are wanting gender reassignment or who are transgender. And they will come to me, and typically when they come to me, they bring one parent or the other. I've never had both parents show up. But one young man who came with me, with his mother, and his first question to me was, is God still going to love me, even though I was born a female and now I am declaring that I am male? Is God still going to love me? Because God made me that way. And, Grandma told me, well, God made you a girl and yada, yada. And then the question to me was, what do I do about my dad? My father is so angry with me. And I looked at this young person and I said, well, you have to give your dad a minute to grieve.
Right.
And he looked at me, he said, what do you mean?
Right.
I said, your father had a vision in his mind of walking his daughter down the aisle, of his daughter giving birth to grandchildren, of his daughter doing the X, Y, and Z, and you need to give him a half a minute. And this young person looked at me and said, holy shit, Denise, I never thought of that before. And I said, grief comes in many ways and in waves. And if you allow him the space to grieve the death of his daughter, you may very well find yourself having your father as your best man one day. So when we're talking about death without dying, right now we're experiencing death in ways that would never have been talked about 10 years ago.
Try
5 years ago, yeah.
Transgender is so new in the openness of it.
Yes.
And that, amen. But again, that's one of those things where it's been around since the beginning of time.
Yes.
And again, us coming out of the naivety, coming into the openness and having to face the death of our assumption, everything is supposed to be as I see it.
Yes.
Not the way it tells me it is.
Yes. Yes. Including religion.
And the whole kit and caboodle.
The whole kit and caboodle. The whole kit and caboodle. The number of people who have said to me, Denise, I've always loved going to church, kind of, sort of, but now with the pandemic, I've just been spending, a bit of time outdoor on Sunday. Outdoors, or I've learned that I can light my own candle in my house. And, with trepidation in their voice and, waiting for the hammer, the judgmental hammer of religion to come, hammering down on their heads for not being in a brick and mortar place of worship. And just looking for somebody to say, well, you do know that God is everywhere.
Right.
And that you are allowed to light a candle within your own home and to sit with your own divinity outside or inside or anywhere.
That very issue is the first time a nun swooped down the aisle at me as a 4-year-old reading the catechism in, catechism class. Who's God? Where's God? Where does God? Why does God love you? And the question is, where is God? God is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at this as a 4-year-old, raised my hand and questioned the nun, if God is everywhere, why isn't he at my house on Sunday?
Woo! Troublemaker.
And I think that this is again Mother Nature saying, everybody go to your room. It means God is where we are.
Yes.
God comes to us where we are.
Yes.
And that paradigm is really something we don't go to God. God is already with us. We need to remember that. And we can go to a house of worship, whether it's a hill, a tree, a flake, a blade of glass. It's still a sacred destination for where one feels that God resides.
Yes.
And I'm aware in my own experience that God is intelligent enough to be everywhere. Where is God? God is everywhere. That was in the book that I was reading. That I was being taught as a child. Where is God? God is everywhere.
Yeah.
And for us to remember that, what are we grieving? We're grieving being seen to go to church. Socializing.
Yes.
Being seen as devout or holy or good or even pious.
Yes.
You know, the shadow in me can go up and go, well, if somebody don't see you going to church, does that mean they know you're sacred, or do you have to go there to prove it? Because you're sitting all day at home.
Well, and the other part of that too, Sandy, is let's talk about the anger that comes with the death without dying. Because some people, it's been my experience, are a little angry when they discover that they could have been, communing with the voice of Creator, the energy of Creator this whole time, as a for instance. And so there's the anger that says, hey, wait a minute. Now that I know the truth, or I'm allowing myself to see the truth, because I'm going to go there now.
Right.
Because I won't be punished for not being there. So I've got an extra few minutes.
Right.
I think somebody told me something that maybe just wasn't true. And now I'm angry about it because I've been lied to for a long time. There can be anger that comes with it.
We can reframe this. We can reframe it also because, yes, it's a lie, but no, it's not a lie. Yes, it's a lie because there's more than just one vehicle. No, it's not a lie because somebody believes in it and says this is the way it is, and for some they need that. And so you and I have that same kind of anger and aggression where it comes to, you can't deny me being sacred. And this goes right back to the beginning, because I'm a woman and I fell in love with somebody who isn't Catholic, or my body is saying I'm ready to have sex and I'm not a whore because my body's ready to have sex. And I'm old enough, but I'm not married.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that place where, but if God made me, and God made me in that image, then he made men, so God must be a man and a woman? Wait a minute, what?
Mm-hmm.
And there's the beauty of, I am grateful. I'm grateful I'm born in an arena of my own psychic development or spiritual being or humanness that has been placed in a situation that made me think rather than just follow.
Yeah.
That's just me. I know people that love to follow and do follow and will follow, and following is who they are. God bless. Amen. Hallelujah. I did follow when I was a child because, God dang, I was a good kid.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started stumbling and going, wait a minute, there's a pebble, I want to pick this up. Wait a minute, there's another. I am grateful in hindsight that I'm curious and angry and frustrated and opinionated enough to say, this ain't it.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the only thing. And that is a death to my own ability to be safe by following.
Mm-hmm.
Because it wasn't comfortable all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging to say, I'm willing to be who I am, knowing that I'm risking everything and be accused for the very thing I'm doing as being wrong.
Which brings us to, the death without dying, then there's a rebirth.
Exactly.
And sometimes we're afraid of the rebirth, but more often we can be afraid or concerned with what others are going to think of us when we're the ones rising from the ashes, because we are never, ever, ever the same. When we go through an experience, death without dying, let's call it dark night of the soul, transformation. For some, it's like almost a complete transfiguration of who they are. And there can be this worry of, but oh my God, what will my family think? What will the neighbors say?
Well, our family thinks what it does. And the hardship is, if I'm not following, when we don't follow, are we still allowed to belong?
Right.
Excommunication is a horrific thing.
Yes, it is.
Because the hardship is, I want to belong, but I can't because I don't. And do you leave before you're kicked out, or you kick out and say, well, I want to belong? I mean, that hardship, the dying of the safety, I want to say this in that way that's really tender. Being who we are is an opportunity to explore the greatness of the options that are available to us to make us more or the same of what we think life is.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that really like being in the sequence of events that just says, do this and you get that, God bless. But it ain't me. And I'm still blessed. And they are blessed in their own way. And the death becomes now, are we able to have a conversation? Are we acceptable to each other? And that's a radical kind of death, because you know what? There are people that don't want that. They don't want the difference to exist. It scares them, and they'd rather kill it. And
yes.
that to me is the place where I am willing to have something die. I'm willing to have the hostility of difference die.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can be born into some other realm of space and time and gratitude, and to see what the creation is that's creating now, because it's expansive. And I agree with you. It's so ancient, it's come back to the phenomena of that intelligence that created it all in the beginning.
Well, exactly. Exactly. And, when we look at things from the spiritual aspect, I was talking to Barbara, my sister, yesterday. She was calling to tell me about the ceremonies up at Devil's Tower or Greyhorn Butte with Arval and Ivan Looking Horse on Saturday and Sunday. And, she was part of the prayer ceremony. She was given tobacco, and she was asked to hold the energetic space of Grandmother Earth while the four medicine men held the four directions. She was asked to stand in the center representing Grandmother. And yeah, and she's so well respected, as you know. And when we think about the fact that we in our humanness are experiencing change, so is Grandmother. And we're in this together. And for some people, the reality is, at the end of this epic, as you called it, we are not going to be the same. And we may be within the unit of one family. Everybody might be different. Slightly, there might be some that are vastly different. Right. And so what do you say to somebody, Sandy, who comes out on the other end of this amazing journey we're all walking through right now? Vastly different, and is feeling perhaps persuaded to go back to their old way, or to try to fit in, but their heart and their soul is longing to roll with the change, with the unfoldment of who they are. I believe that from personally myself, that if we don't unfold, if we don't honor our soul's path, we can become ill on many levels of our being. So how does somebody hold steady to embracing the unfoldment in the face of, wow, you're really different, and we don't know if we can cope with that or how we're going to accept that?
To know that your tribe also alters. Thank you.
Will you talk about that for a sec?
Oh my God. There's the beauty of, if I only had my original network of connection, I would have missed out on the vastness of something so global and historical in my own path of just being able to walk away from my hometown and say, I can't stay here. Sad, but I can't stay here. And to know that the tribes that I found started in, my new tribe was, guess what? As soon as I walked out the front door and you found a neighborhood. The next tribe was, as soon as we moved from that neighborhood, the next neighborhood. As soon as we walked out of that school and went into the next school, that tribe. As soon as you leave a classroom and go to a classroom, it's like, oh my God, I'm in a new class, I'm in a new school. What's going to happen? It's a new tribe, new people, new ideas. As soon as you walk out of one church into a synagogue, a whole other tribe. And to know that the tribe of my spirituality has a destination that has waited for me to be brave enough to continue my separation from my past, to meet my present by going into my future. And the sadness is that I am restless, and so is my life. I wish it could be a little bit more peaceful. I do grieve that. But the joy of whatever the chaos is on the other side always brings the value of, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's the nugget of what was being brought to me as equally as I was going to it.
Yes.
I want everybody to hear this as plain as my voice is. Your future is walking to you as incredibly devoted to you as you are walking to it. It's not out there just waiting for you to drag your sorry ass to it. And hope you find it.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're lucky, it is over there going, oh my God, they took a left. Hurry up, take a left, right, because they're mirroring you.
Yep.
And the horizon is there. It doesn't just wait for you, it meets you.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is what is so astounding. I am blown away with how during the 70s, if you didn't go to Finhorn, you were not spiritual. You just weren't.
Wow.
You were criticized, you were denied, you were looked at as less than, and you couldn't have gotten me to go to Finhorn if you paid me a first-class ticket. It was like, nah. And it was the texture of what that spirituality did to my New Yorkness, or just who I am. I wasn't the frequency of that establishment. I knew it, they knew it, but the judgment of it was, we've been, you ain't, therefore I was not included in something. So I kind of denied my experience of going to Europe as, well, I'm not going to go to Europe. I'm just not going to go to Europe. Well, interestingly enough, someone who went to Finhorn gives me some names of people that she met in Finhorn. When Sir Charles told everybody in class one night Sandra's going to move to Switzerland, and I thought, maybe San Francisco, and I'm, on my way to Switzerland, and this woman who went to Finhorn gives me the name of these people who, guess what, I met in Switzerland. That gave me the rest of my life from within 4 months of me arriving into Switzerland.
Wow.
So it's that place of, I may know where I don't want to go, but Spirit knows where I'm going to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how many things, of the very things I thought I wasn't going to go to, fed me what I needed. Thin horn, other people got there to meet, so they could meet me in other places.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the, I mean, in hindsight, it's like, what happened to make this happen?
Right.
It's astounding.
It is.
And therefore, my future is the magnet that pulls me toward it. My past is the magnet that pushes me away from it. I grieve momentum as much as I'm thrilled by it. And the death is, if I'm not alive. Nobody is.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pause, you're recovering from whatever it is that you just did as you get ready for what you're about to do. You're not left out. You're not abandoned. In the beauty of all this insanity, one of my greatest moments was when my spirit said, because my ego was so ambitious and get up. And my spirit said, can't you see you're paralyzed? Lay down. Recover.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because the death of my identity was so severe. When my father died, and I lost my business, and this, that, and the other thing. I achieved something so fast. I thought I was at the top of my game, and that was only the beginning of and it was the end of everything. And that's already 40 years ago. So, amen, hallelujah. Time is fast.
Mm-hmm.
No, 30 years. My father's dead 30 years. How did that happen?
Wow.
Time moves on no matter what.
It certainly does.
And you know what? One of the things I want to honor for all of us, and I want to honor it in you, it's resilience.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even know what it is that motivates us when it really, really does, other than something inside us says, we're not done, keep going.
Right.
And it can piss us off because we don't know what we're going to do. But it does. And it's that innate, I think it's called love, to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a place where it's like, I'm glad I made it. I'm glad I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm glad I stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I didn't want to, I am glad I stayed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we'll get through this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a mistake.
Not even a little.
I think, let's honor that, because this is not a mistake. We're not getting it wrong.
Right.
This upheaval, this reckoning is wrecking everything so that a deeper truth can truly be exposed, so that we can expose our deeper truths, even to ourselves.
I love that.
Yeah. So.
Well, Sandra, we're past the top of the hour.
Well, there you go.
And that was a I know, that was a really fast hour, and I'd like to thank everyone who joined us in the chat room and everyone who is listening around Grandmother Earth this evening or this morning, wherever you happen to be and in the archives. We appreciate you, and thank you for being here at this time. You know, I've had many conversations with my relatives out west, and you know, one of my favorite relatives out west was my brother, Guy Dullknife. And he and I had many, many, many conversations about the Rainbow Tribe. And my other dear friend, Arval Looking Horse, he and I have had conversations about the arrival of the Rainbow Tribe. And here we are. And this time was prophesied that the time of the Rainbow people, the Rainbow Tribe, would appear. And that Rainbow Tribe is all of us. And it's a melding of our magic. It's a melding of our medicine. It's a melding of our gifts and our talents to create something new, something universal, something unified. Yes. And it's an exciting time. And it's a time of change, a time of letting go, of embracing, and of allowing the possibilities to come to the surface and to exist, and sometimes taking a moment to look at those and try them on, and how do they feel, and how does it smell, and how does it taste, and to understand that we're exactly where we need to be.
And it's a convenient inconvenience.
Yes, it is.
You
Yes.
know, it's if it didn't have the struggle, it wouldn't have the friction that's necessary to create the quickening.
That's right.
And our civilization is a absolute melting pot of incredible diabolical qualities.
Mm-hmm.
But every single one of us is necessary in order for what we're going through to happen. So whoever we are, individually or in our tribes or in our continent, in our idea, our psyche is no longer allowed to be asleep. There is a disturbance in the force.
Yes, there is.
And everybody knows it, and it ain't a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it, you know, I have a gratitude that I'm alive during this time, and I'm in awe of the ones. I mean, what Easton will be experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
the genius that will be out there by then.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, what I acquired in my lifetime compared to what my grandmother acquired in her lifetime. You know, she was around when the phone wasn't.
Right.
Airplanes weren't. And to know what's coming up next is at such a speed of light. It's quantum.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the quantum time where starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight. Wish I may, wish I might have my wish come true tonight. I'm gonna make a wish. Everybody, there's my first star. It's like no matter what. Oh, and lightning bugs. Oh my God, it's officially summer. I just turned 10 right there before your very eyes. Makes me want to get a mayonnaise jar. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's going on, your soul has gone through it already.
Mm-hmm.
Let your flesh remember you're older than what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And breathe.
Beautifully
my
said.
bones are weary, but
Right.
my attitude is still young. And that's everything.
That's right. With that, everyone, good night. Have a blessed evening, a blessed day, and get out there and shine on as only you can do so. Good night, Sandy.
Good night, Dana. Good night, everybody, and thank you for the topic. Be well.